Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Celina Pierman, and if we've had some time together before, I'm grateful you came back. If we are new to you, me and our team, thank you for checking this out today. These short webinars are really designed to share some ideas with you that come from content where I've presented on it at conferences, in different programs within companies, just to give you maybe a boost for what you need today, maybe a tip or technique, or hopefully a different way to think about a topic. You have many different ways you can access content, and who you listen to, what you read. We're just glad you decided to spend a little bit of time with us. For today, and each of these have a little bit different format, we're just digging right into the content. In this particular format, there isn't a lot of other interaction so that I can give you as much as possible during this time, and then you can choose. A little bit like choose your own adventure. If you have a follow-up question, email me. If you want more on the topic, please reach out and we can talk about in ways we can do that. Today's topic, mental clutter at work, has one that's been coming up much over the last year. And I've had the opportunity to present on it, teach on it, facilitate programs on it many times. And I want to share the idea with you about why this has become a strong topic, but also what do we do with it? Like, what are those action steps you could take to make some progress on this topic? And if you're looking for more than what we can cover in this 30 minutes, please reach out. We'll have some conversation and figure out best ways to get you your next solutions. It's really interesting to me how everyone shows up in this workspace today and in other aspects of our lives with so much on the brain. That's where this phrase mental clutter comes out of. I know I was raised and taught in some of my first jobs, leave it at the door. Meaning, whatever you're carrying in with you, when you go to work, it stops in the doorway. What I've noticed over these last 30 years of my professional work, and especially in these last decade of conversations within companies as technology has become more and more present, that the whole person walks into work. And with that, they bring some stuff. And while there are a number of people out there who speak about that, one of my favorite examples comes from the fact we all carry it in with us, and whatever it is we carry is invisible to anybody else unless we choose to tell them. And that has a weight to it, depending on what else is going on in our world. What I want you to consider for today is why we miss what matters. And I promise you more focus on that, what to do about it. Now, of course, the recording will be made available if you're watching with us live or you choose to check this out later. Take screenshots if something is helpful for you, and if there's additional key points that you want more content on, please reach out. I have been really excited for our team about the recent initiative we've undertaken. And this is in partnership with Dr. Mel Gonerman with Wartburg College. And we have co-authored this particular research initiative. So I really have spent a lot of this time talking about uncertainty is not going away, but how we lead through it matters. And we want to be able to study that, to talk about it, to look at who else is studying this and bring you, what I love to say, just some practical insights in how we live this day to day. So if that is something you'd like to know more about, we have a couple of different options for you. The QR code available there. Just reach out to any one of us and we'll tell you what we're up to. And I hope that you can watch for more updates coming on that down the road. Now, while I can share that with you, it's actually like connected to our topic today, right? Mental clutter happens because there's stuff filling up our brains that we've got to sort through And I believe that's even more challenging under uncertain circumstances. So, my guiding question for you today is how well are we designing our work environment or even our personal environments for attention, awareness, and action? Those are the three A's I use. That when we think about performance, we have to be able to give it our attention. We need to maintain awareness around us. But ultimately, this is about getting the work done, taking action on whatever it is we need to do. What does that mean when it comes to mental clutter? If you think about the word clutter, it's that combination of stuff. I wish you could see the rest of the room where I'm sitting. I'm surrounded by it, right? In our home spaces, our workspaces. Well, now we're talking about our brain space. So, mental clutter has been identified as anything that includes or competes for attention, time, pressure, fatigue, distraction, stress, or too many priorities. When the brain is overloaded, what it tends to do is default to habit, not careful observation. So we're walking around with all this stuff in our head. And you know what? Those devices, I brought mine in with me today because I don't like them have it in here when I'm presenting, but these devices, right? The mental clutter from scrolling, from so much input coming into our brain. Now, our brain had some issues prior to this. It has amazing capabilities, but also we know that there are over 300 documented cognitive errors that happen because stuff gets stuck, or we shift a perspective, and we are amazingly human when it comes to the things that then come out as a result of that mental clutter. At work, what do I see every day walking into companies? Employees that have to manage multiple priorities at once. Time pressure that may push speed over awareness. Fatigue or repetition that may reduce attention to detail. And too much information that may make it harder to identify, out of all the things I could be working on right now, what matters most. So we're seeing this conversation around mental clutter because everybody's walking in really full. Their brains are already overloaded. What I want us considering in this conversation is, what is my role as a leader to help my employee focus on what's more important? How do I coach the fact that for them to do the work they need to do, we need to set down some of that other stuff? And that we have a responsibility as people and as professionals to do the things we can do to manage all that stuff that's piling up in our brains. So, my reflection prompt for you on that today is, what is competing for our team's attention? And what might that be costing us? Any of the prompts that I'm sharing with you today, you could take just one of those to a staff meeting. Share a couple of ideas about mental clutter and open up the discussion for what is competing for all the attention of us, who's ever on your team, or maybe it's just you today you want to focus on. And when that overload happens, what might it be costing? We're going to look at a couple of areas that go with that. And while for this limited amount, I can't share all the ones we've been doing the work on, but I'm going to share with you a couple of my favorites. First, filtering and attention. The brain filters information all the time to stay efficient, right? Because if you think about all the things that come into our brain, and it's got to choose, right, what it pays attention to. Here's something else we actually see in routine work. It actually may filter out what matters most. I'm just in the groove and I'm doing my thing, and something else pops up. I have to choose, right, what I continue to focus on. We often think about that with priority management. Or in my case, I often talk about the 300 squirrels that run through my head at any given point in time. But here's what we also know about brain filtering. People don't see everything. They see what they expect to see. If I'm paying attention to a particular area and that's where my focus is, that other things that may disrupt that, right? I have to understand how I'm filtering that or what I give my attention to. Familiar tasks may be done quickly, but not always thoughtfully. What we also know is that repeated exposure to the same conditions, our routine, going into the same work area, going into the same conference room, what we see is risks start to blend in because it's repetitive. And we may look past or overlook small changes because it just looks normal. Like, yeah, that's fine. I'm sure it's good. And we may assume something is fine because it's always been that way. Today, maybe for this time, it's just paying attention for a moment. Like, what do you notice about how you filter information? How can you stay vigilant even in repetition in the same environment? Ask a question of yourself or other people. Where might our team or our people be seeing what they expect instead of what's actually there? We see this in physical environments where there's just stuff sitting around, and it's amazing how many people walk by it and they just go, that's normal. Now, I used to say that as a parent when everybody could walk past things on the stairs. It was a magical power. They could, they were invisible to them, right? You may have had some similar experiences. But just pay attention to what's in the environment. What might we be filtering out or seeing differently because it's just part of our routine. This one may not be a new idea to you, but when you consider mental clutter, and maybe you've made observations about people just not paying attention because they're on their phones. They're not hearing conversations. They miss key ideas because they're just not paying attention to the environment around them. Situational awareness is the ability to notice what is happening right now, understand what it means, and anticipate what could happen next. It is paying attention to the situation around us. And when we're distracted, all that cognitive load is weighing heavy, we miss key things. The last time I gave this presentation, it was specifically around safety, physical safety on the job. And what we need to talk about in some of those conversations is awareness is not just seeing, it's interpreting it and acting in real time. So I can scan the environment, I can be generally aware of conditions around me, but I have to pay attention. And when I'm getting distracted or there's too many things in my brain, we're missing key steps to be able to respond and react in real time when things happen. Because in our environment, people are expected to stay aware, even in fast paced or repetitive conditions. Our attention may narrow under pressure. We go, oh, all of this is going on. I'm going to focus right here, which can risk then important details that we dismiss or miss because my focus is somewhere else. What it can cause is teams may react to problems instead of recognizing early warning signs. Yet our awareness may depend more on the individual rather than being supported by the system. So that's where we're seeing also mentor clutter happen in terms of all the stuff in my head and the system around me is trying to do its best, which reminds us this is a partnership. As a leader, on behalf of an organization, I need to create the conditions so people can do their best work. Combination of both, right? It's not just one or the other. And these are the collaborative conversations we need to think about as we go forward in how we do this work. Reflection prompt here. How are we helping people stay aware in real time and not just after something goes wrong? Because remember, when we miss a deadline or a project, a meeting we're supposed to be in, maybe it's even something more serious. Now we have an injury or an incident that has happened, and our awareness is now peaked because of a real-time event. So, of course, our attention is going to change. What we need to do is shift the conversation to how do we do that in real ways, day in, day out, so it doesn't take something, an event, an injury, to shift our focus. Which leads me to one of the last ones that I want to share with you today. There's so many we could talk through, but as I noted again earlier, I just picked a couple of my favorite for you today. Autopilot and routine. Autopilot is actually that ability to continue to do something without consciously, at the top of our conscious level, be ultra aware we're doing it. It helps us work efficiently because we don't have to stop and think about every single step. Again, we have different levels of awareness. We're more conscious about something or less conscious. So it can help us work efficiently, but it reduces conscious attention, especially when we get into the routine. And what that creates then is the more routine something becomes, the less attention it receives. We go through the motions. We do it again because we've done it 100 times before. This happens in our households. This happens in our workplaces. This happens when we're driving. Autopilot, right? We get to our destination and we did it so automatically that we didn't even pay attention to all the steps that got us there. And I've heard this and probably said it. I've gotten to my destination, go, wow, I don't even remember driving here, right? And I may have done all the things I needed to do to get there, but how focused was I on the steps? What we see in the workplace environment is repetitive tasks that are completed quickly, but they're not always done with a fresh awareness. Now, our brain has to give us a break somewhere, right? So we do some routine things very fast because we can, but we may rely on habit instead of actively checking conditions. When interruptions, though, increase, we can return to the task without resetting. So the risk there is I got interrupted, and so there's some risk with that. But how do I go back into that now responsibility and being aware of switching? So we task switching as I get interrupted, I now take care of you, but now I go back to this. And it's amazing what can happen that we've seen in just a pause right there, reset, now go back to it. Because often in transition, we just do something, and that's the moment at home, in the kitchen, with a knife. I cut my finger. I do something that I should have been able to prevent, but because I was in this transition mode, I missed it. Routine can actually create a false sense of safety. That is when I hear employees say, we've done this 1,000 times. But the risk of actually having something happen next time is just the same as it was for all those times before. Here's your reflection prompt. Where in your world has routine made us more efficient, but potentially less aware? Take one of those prompts and start a conversation just to help people think differently about that. And we started with that idea of mental clutter. So many things are competing for your attention. I firmly believe that in good, healthy ways, we have to find ways to release that so that our brain gets a break. Often in our leadership training, I'll remind us that leaders need think time, but it's really clarity time because all of this stuff swirling around in our brains changes how we input new information. We scan and we notice. Scanning is that intentional way of looking at the environment to detect changes, differences, or missing elements. Noticing is a skill. And we don't often think about that, but to notice in the environment, we can get better at that. That can be taught and practiced. We can do that in new employee onboarding. These are the things you need to watch for. We can do that in professional development. I use the phrase, I want things coming in on your radar screen so that you notice them there. And maybe they are no longer approaching, but you know that they're within your field. People may focus on completing tasks more than observing conditions, right? Because we're so driven to get the next thing done because we have all these things on our to-do list. However, when we step back for a moment just to observe where we're at, it can help because small changes or early signals may go unnoticed if we don't pause. Teams may not consistently ask what's different or what's missing. And what we see without scanning and noticing is visual cues may be present, but we're not actively interpreting them. Reflection prompt. How are we helping people notice what's different, not just what's expected? Now, that can sound very pragmatic, practical in maybe the environment you're in, interruptions, priorities, tasks lists, but it also can happen at a more strategic level, maybe with your workforce. What do we notice in patterns or trends with who's coming to see us or who's applying or who we're hiring? We can think about that with customer mix. We can think about that in strategic positioning in our marketplace. This can be addressed in many different levels. But I really think when we consider the cognitive overload and the amount of mental clutter, again, a lot of that attached to scrolling, that when we can pause to scan and notice, we're going to make better next decisions. So what we're really looking for then are patterns and early warning signs, because our brain is actually wired to use patterns to work faster, but it can cause us to miss those subtle changes that signal risk, which is why we need to pause and notice. And what I love about that early warning detection signal, right? Early warning signs are often small, quiet, and easy to dismiss. And when we pay attention to them, they can help us get one more step ahead of a decision we need to make. Because in our environment, teams may normalize small issues because they happen frequently. It happens all the time. Is that okay? Is it helping us? Does it have future potential risk? Too often, we only see patterns after something goes wrong. And what we can look for instead are subtle shifts. Because if we don't pay attention to those subtle shifts, sound, movement, behavior, output, we may not be asking the right questions. And certainly when it comes to physical safety, those almost miss or near misses have a role, but they do for the rest of us too. Even when physical safety isn't at risk, those almost missed moments aren't discussed or shared, so we don't get the real value from the learning. One more reflection prompt. What small signals are we getting used to that we should be paying attention to? So let's talk about resetting attention. Attention is not constant. It needs to be reset, especially during long, repetitive, or high pressure work. And without intentional resets, our attention drifts. There may be a few structured moments to pause and refocus, but work continues through interruptions without resetting awareness. I see it all the times that teams may not regularly step back to reassess conditions because we're so busy taking care of what we need to. And yet, people are expected to stay focused and yet not always given the tools to do so. So where could we build in some simple pause points to help people reset and refocus? That would be a great team discussion. Like, where do you feel hurried? How do we see even in 60 seconds, it actually saves us some minutes later by refocusing and being able to regroup before we jump in. So we're going to do a last activity today. I'm going to give you a few minutes with each of the next two screens as we work through this final activity. And again, they'll be available on the recording, so you'll get that, and you can always take this as part of a team discussion. For this particular exercise, number one is it doesn't exist. 2, 3, it exists, but not consistently. 4, 5, strong and consistent. I'm going to read through each of these. And again, this is just designed as a quick exercise, but any of these items, you could just pull one of them and take them to your next staff meeting. We're going to do 2, clarity and focus. We clearly communicate the top 1 to 2 risks of each shift or each task. Does not matter what kind of environment you're in. You can identify what are the things we should be paying attention to. What could a risk be? It might be a piece of machinery, but it might be a key customer call. Where are you at? 1 to 5, 5 is high, 1 is low. We avoid overwhelming employees with too much information at once. We have more data, more information coming at us every single day. What we need to be working on, and often what I provide training on, is how do you discern through all this stuff what's most important to pay attention to? Because that's linked directly with decision making. Priorities are clear and reinforced throughout the day because that will continue to shift. On a scale from 1 to 5, how are you doing? We simplify messaging so what matters most stands out. We need to stage multiple changes. We need to simplify messages because, again, overload creates that clutter. Our teams understand what's required for what requires the most attention right now. When we're not clear about it, people make it up. If you want people focused on something, you have to name it. So there's 5 to start. We're going to do one more set. Maybe one of those really stands out to you, and that's something you could take away from today. I want to also consider for just a moment in these last 5, designing for attention, really interrupting autopilot. I mentioned pause points a moment ago. I want to put a few more areas of emphasis on that. We have built in pause points, 1 to 5, 5 being high, start of shift, high risk tasks after interruptions. As a leader, I want us asking, what are we missing? Members of my team are on the webinar here today, and it's something I love to ask, like in all of this right now, what are we missing? Because we get used to seeing what we see. And I want us not only connecting the dots, but I want us looking in between. What is it we are not paying attention to? I want us to also intentionally change routines to prevent blind spots. So there are arguments for standard work, and I believe in that because standard work we get qualified to do it well. But when we become so in the routine that we miss things, that's what we have to pay attention to, which is why we need to rotate focus areas to keep attention fresh. We recognize that repetition can reduce awareness and actively address it. Where in your work does it become so repetitive, people aren't paying attention to it, and that's where we end up with a miss. Those were 2 I wanted to add in for today because my hope is through these webinars of us offering you content, for some of you, it might give you a glimpse of what I do when I'm not on a Zoom screen like this, in real conversations, in conference rooms, in organizations, on stages, for what's going to be our next best move. So maybe today, consider how are we unintentionally making it harder for people to see what's going on around them? How are we unintentionally encouraging people to ignore something? And where could we simplify something, pause, or refocus attention? We're not supposed to do this for everything all at once. Out of all the things that you're responsible for doing, pick one that just may need a boost. 3 final reflections as we finish. One thing we might need to simplify. I love this prompt in a staff meeting. What has gotten too complicated? Because again, too complicated creates unnecessarily necessary mental clutter. Many times when we're trying to improve a process or take care of a complex situation, the goal is not to make it more complicated, but to simplify. I love asking on teams, what's one thing we need to talk about more? I know our own team should probably use this question more often. What's something we're not talking about? And it's not because we don't want to, we're just not paying attention to it, but it's important enough to bring up. And then certainly we see with this one thing we need to build into our system so that, right, it gets continued and repeated, but not repeated in a way that puts us at risk. Performance isn't just about what people know. It's about what they notice in a moment that matters the most. That may be in a safety sensitive moment, that may be in a key customer meeting, that could be in a work process where that now has implications on others. And what we want to think about is whether the environment, whether that's on site, remote, who you're around, all of the physical attributes, but also the psychosocial factors that either help or hinder mental clutter. Thank you for joining in today. Again, I want to mention, please check out what we're up to. If you go to our website and you can see it listed there, we've got it's just been so fun as a team to take on some new conversations about how can we help walk alongside organizations and have the biggest impact. You're the first to hear this. If you're watching the recording later, hopefully July 16th is still in your scope, but we're offering a new something, save the date. We're excited to announce after June 1st what's coming next, and I hope that you'll follow along. Thank you for being part of today, and if we've had some partnership, our team is so grateful for you trusting us with that work, and I love showing up every day to help you with it. If you're new to us, please reach out if we can answer questions and support you in ways that are a great fit for you and a great fit for us. We're all in. Take care, be well, and be safe. Thank you, everyone.